Good morning, everybody. So today it's day 46 of compassionate response to COVID-19, and my name is Bodhi, and so we've had 6 different themes over the last weeks, so we're now moving on to the theme of Buddhist metaphysics. So this is me putting my intellectual head on and kind of looking into some of the kind of philosophy behind Buddhism, and so the word metaphysics means the things after the physics. So the physics is like what we measuring things in the material world, and what we can see, what we can observe. So metaphysics is what stands behind that. So it's like it's the exploration in philosophy of concepts such as time and space and being and non-being and all that sort of thing is metaphysics. So Buddhist metaphysics is we're going to explore that side of things, what the Buddha said about all of that, it's just it's like the philosophy behind things. So I'm going to spend maybe a week on this, and we get a chance to look at the middle. So today we're going to talk about the middle way. So the middle way between the extremes of eternalism on the one hand, and what's called annihilationism on the other. Where eternalism, where we think that things are somewhere impermanent. Somewhere permanent. There's a permanent essence to things behind what we observe, and the other extreme is that things just come to an end. Death, there's nothing after death, or whatever it is, things are just annihilated. So Buddhism talks about the middle way between these two extreme views. Things are completely permanent behind phenomena. There isn't anything, or things when the world when the world ends, everything ends. When the world of our experience ends, then there isn't anything left. The carries on. So I'm going to look at a little bit at the story of the Buddha, of Siddhartha Gautama, who became the Buddha, and how that came about. So we're going to look at the life of the Buddha a little bit, and then look at we're going to introduce some ideas from Robert Morrison's book. Robert Morrison is Sagramati, who's the top scholar in the Tree Ratna Buddhist community, and he's got a Oxford University Press book, Nietzsche and Buddhism. So we'll look into some of this, into that a little bit about. So Nietzsche had this view that Buddhism was something called passive nihilism. A bit like just kind of he thought it was for people who sort of just feeling fatigued and they've had enough, and they just want a quiet existence. So kind of we'll address that, hopefully, that idea. So it's quite exciting, really, all this stuff today. So but we'll begin as we normally do with morning, Olivia. With some body work. So if you want to all stand up, we'll do some of that. All right, so let's begin by just drumming with your fingers on your skull. Rub your hands together, up the backs of your hands, brushing down your arms. And shaking everything out. Shake your hands and feet. It's always when you're doing body work, it's like you need to gauge what you need, you know, so not kind of overriding anything, any signal from your body that I've had enough now. But you need to kind of be awake to what your body wants as well. So yeah, I'm trying to just work out what I need. Squeeze your hands. So it's all about being aware of your actual body and the state that it's in, and how much energy is in it, and how much relaxation, and what you might need to do to boost the vitality if you haven't got enough, or to calm it down actually if you've got too much. So yeah, just squeezing your hands. It seems to be what I need to do today. Squeezing up your arms. And then just little kind of fingers on your chest. So there's a thing called EFT, or emotional freedom technique, where people do this sort of tapping thing to try and wake up their emotions. Do a little bit of that. How do you feel at the moment? Get around your collarbones there. Shake everything out, hands and feet. Some sort of long shake like that. So that your tension just flies off the end of your fingers. And then just put your hands on your stomach and just circling clockwise. One hand following the other. So you work out what's something that feels soothing. So going right around the outside of your belly. And really feeling the contact of your feet and the ground. So you're coming down to earth. Maybe take a few longer and deeper breaths. Long leisurely breaths. Okay, that'll do, I think. So now taking a seat for meditation. So if you're new here, just find something, chair to sit on. So it's a chair that's relatively firm so that you're not sinking into it. Or you could sit on cushions on the floor, but they need to be quite firm. So I'll lead us in a body scan meditation, and then leading into being aware of the breath, the detail in the breath. So settling into your posture. So allowing your mind to quieten down. And being aware of the shape of your body. And allowing your body to take care of itself, so your body can just sit there, sit on the seat. Your mind and your emotions don't need to be involved. It's quite capable of just sitting down. And all you need to do is to pay some attention to whether you're leaning over, forwards or backwards, or side to side, one side or the other side. And if your spine is relatively vertical, then the muscles of your body can feel confident that they will be supported by the bones of your body. And therefore can let go of any holding or tensing. So allowing your attention to rest around the crown of your head. Just imagining at the crown of the head that there's a softening takes place there, letting go. So that the scalp becomes looser and softer. And then that softening spreads to your forehead, having a sense of your brow just being broad and loose and soft. So keep checking that you're just letting your body sit down. You're not forcing it to sit up in a sit up straight or anything like that. It's in charge. It knows what it's doing. And just balancing your spine so that the weight goes down into the ground. And then softening in the face, around the eyes and around the nose and the mouth. Softening in the back of the throat where the tongue is attached to the back of the mouth. In the jaw, the throat. And across the shoulders, across the top of the shoulders where the neck meets the torso, softening in those muscles so that the shoulder joints can feel like they're moving a little bit away from each other. Having a sense of freedom in the shoulder joints. May the shoulder joints be free to move so that the arms can extend away from the shoulder joints, becoming longer. So a long muscle cannot be a tense muscle. Same with the elbow joints and the wrists and the knuckles. May they all be free to move so that the arms from the elbows downwards just become longer. And having a sense of the torso being balanced and supported by the spine. Noticing how we're feeling at the moment. And we don't need to do anything about that, we don't need to worry about that or judge ourselves about that. But just acknowledge how we are at the moment, what we're bringing into the meditation. And having a sense of how we are, however we are, is supported by our body. And being aware of our lower torso, our stomach, our lower back, and our legs and feet. So again, just allowing the bones of the body to be supporting the weight, softening in the muscles of the lower part of the body. And softening the hands and feet and the face, where all the millions of nerve endings are that help us express things and manipulate things, manipulate objects. Letting all of that come to a quiet place. And then taking our attention to our breathing. Noticing the gentle rising and falling of our shoulders as we breathe. The expanding and contracting of our rib cage, rising and falling of our abdomen, diaphragm. So we're just going to take our attention to the detail in our breath. So there'll be something that's actually happening in each moment in terms of sensation and movement of the breath. So the aim in this meditation is to try and know what's happening from moment to moment. So what can we say is happening right now in this moment? What are the actual sensations we can say are present? And in the next moment, and the next moment. So it's easy to just be vague about the fact that we are breathing and stop there, but what we're trying to do is to actually notice our actual sensation in each moment, actual experience in each moment. Mindfulness of breathing. can you say is happening right now, and then right now, and then right now, each moment at a time? Do you know whether you know what's happening or not? If you know about the detail in your breath, you probably know what's happening. If you don't know about the detail, you probably don't know. I'm just trying to keep the proportion of time that we do know what's happening as high as possible, but not worrying if we wander off. Just come back to the next little bit of detail in the breath. So it's following the detail in your breath from moment to moment. Do you know what's happening right now in terms of sensation and movement, and in the next moment and the next moment? So just checking that you're still relying on your body to support you. You're just letting it be there, just letting it sit there, and you're just balancing your spine so that your weight is taken down into the ground. You're not leaning over one way up, either forwards or backwards or side to side. Because if you are, you're going to have to tense on one side of the body to hold your body up. So if you're balanced in the body, your muscles are going to feel it's okay to let go. Confidence that they can let go. So in your own time, just bringing that meditation to a close. Okay, so on to today's topic, which is Buddhist metaphysics. So, as I said earlier, metaphysics is means the things after the physics. So, the physics is the what we can see, what we can make of the material world. So we have the science of physics, and so metaphysics is in a way what kind of stands behind that, or what what we can say about things, beyond things like existence and non-existence, or time and space, or that sort of thing. How the way that things are, the way that the world, the universe is. Trying to make it as palatable as possible. So the basic story was that with the Buddha, I feel a bit shaken now because the video stopped. My battery ran out, so I'm kind of slightly kind of what not it's shaking me kind of concentration a little bit. Maybe I'll just sit for a bit. Just can't just come back to what I'm trying to do here. Yeah, so what I'm trying to do is to talk about the middle way. So Buddhism is said to be the middle way between eternalism and annihilationism. So eternalism is where you have you believe that there's something permanent in the universe that is unchanging. So, for instance, the idea of a creator God who's just there all the time, beyond the world of appearances, is an example of that. And in Hinduism, you had the idea of Brahman as this permanent essence in the universe. And the Hindus believed in something called Atman, so Atman is this fixed self that you have, and there's in Hinduism there's a famous phrase tvam asi, thus you are this, and it's like the example used is by Hindu sages is that if you take some water and it's got salt in it, wherever you taste the water, it'll taste of salt. So the idea is that if you really look, wherever you taste experience, there'll be this permanent self behind it. There'll be you are this permanent fixed self, beyond your normal kind of experience. And in Hinduism, it's interesting that a kind of difference between Hinduism and Buddhism is that when people are practicing Hinduism, then they have this idea of purity, or trying to connect with purity. So when so you're not allowed to something. I don't know massive amounts about this, but it's something like contact with a dead body makes you a bit impure, or so you then got to purify yourself before you then go in a temple or something like that. So the idea is that there's the normal world of experience is kind of like somehow affects your purity. Well, Buddhism has nothing like that. We do reflections on death and on the decomposition of a corpse, that sort of thing, as a meditation. So I'm just going to cut to the chase here a bit. So basically, so this is, I can only see it small screening, so that we can see it. There's like three levels really. There's metaphysics at the top here of the pyramid, and then there's the view in the middle. There's the psychological view about things, and then at the bottom is the ethical view about things. So on the middle, so metaphysics is, so on the middle level we've got on the one side we've got this idea of Atman, or the immortal soul, which sits behind the flux of experience. So this is the Hindu view, the Brahminical view. On the other side, we've got the idea that the personality is kind of identified with the body. So this is more like the materialist view. People often have in the West that there is just things end at death. It's the annihilationist view. So things, you just live, and then when you die, that's the end of it. Things just everything's annihilated at death. So these are the two extremes: eternalism and annihilationism. But Buddhism is in the middle there somewhere. So what you have is something called So this is Atmavada. Vada just means way or something like that. Anatmavada means the way, the non-self way. So so this is that there is some sort of self there, but it's conditioned. It's determined by conditions. So I've talked about this quite a lot. That conditionality is the main teaching of the Buddha. So on the ethical level, what we have is, and we've got a little image here. I don't know if you can see it, of somebody hanging onto a bit of driftwood. So it's a bit like on the ethical level. It's almost like the idea is that somehow matter is illusory, and with this eternalist view, matter is illusory and kind of evil. So you get this when Christian ascetics flagellating themselves, or Hindu ascetics holding the arm up in the air until it withers, that sort of thing. So it's the idea that our sensory experience, our materiality, is somehow evil, or it's somehow a distraction from this idea of purity. And that on an ethical level, commandments are to be followed, and discipline is elevated as a practice over the idea of looking into your own experience about how things work. Yeah, so this is an extreme view according to Buddhism. So you're hanging on to a bit of driftwood. You're not really looking after yourself. You're kind of like slightly punishing yourself in order to come into contact with this sense of purity. And then on the other side, you've got like an ocean-going yacht on the ethical level. So it's a bit like you just pursue pleasurable experiences for their own sake. So looking to your own experience for guidance is elevated over self-discipline and rational investigation of reality. So it's almost like you're giving too much attention to the material world. It's almost like the material world is everything, is all that there is. And you're not paying attention to maybe the consequences. So this is annihilationism. So you're thinking that, I'm just going to, when I die, that'll be the end of it. And in a way, it's a bit anti-ethical, because it's saying, well, there aren't going to be any consequences for my life. Maybe you kind of you're sort of ethical in a certain sort of way in life, but that is kind of, it's always subserving your materialist kind of agenda. But Buddhism is in the middle here, and I've got an image of a dinghy or something, like an inflatable dinghy. So in the middle, it's like a raft. So it's like the raft is, it's not like the driftwood. It's not like you're in the water and you're suffering. It's like you're looking after yourself. And I've got the natural morality. You're looking after yourself. So we've talked about looking after our bodies, so that we don't go crashing into things, and we maximize the pleasure that can come from the body by looking after it, by taking care of it, by doing exercise and all that sort of thing. But then, we don't go to, we don't sort of it doesn't become everything. Pleasures in the body doesn't become everything, because we have a sense of natural morality. Well, what is going to, if I take all the world's resources, then other beings are not going to be able to have them, So there's a sense in which we're looking after everybody's body, all beings is body. So Buddhists become vegetarians and vegans, and don't kind of allow their pursuit of sensory pleasure to become a source of suffering for others. So it's like the raft is a sufficient vehicle to keep us afloat, isn't it? But it's not excessive. It's not like that. It's not like an ocean. We don't need an ocean-going yacht, But we need more than a piece of driftwood to hang on to. So in the life story of the Buddha, what happened was that he was a young man living in India about 2,500 years ago, and his name was Siddhartha Gautama, and he was like the son of a kind of chieftain or something like that. I mean, often when you get mythology, must remember to look at the camera. When you get mythology in any religion, it's like it becomes a story, so it's often embellished. So he was the prince in the story. So, but it's probably like the son of a chieftain or something like that, of the Shakya tribe. The story goes that he was living in the palace. So he's just had a pleasant life basically, and it's like he said he went out of the palace or his home, and he saw four sights. He saw somebody who was ill, somebody who was old, and then he saw a corpse. And it's a bit like that again. And then finally he saw a wandering holy man, or Shramana. And so I think this is just it's just indicating that at some point he realised that old age, sickness, and death were a problem. It dawned on him. This four sights are just saying that he got it. That no matter how much pleasure he had in life, then he was definitely going to die. He may get old, and he's probably going to get sick. But then the fourth sight was that he saw a wandering holy man, and this gave him a clue as to that maybe spiritual practice of some form or other would solve the problem. Anyway, to cut a long story short, he went to these teachers, meditation teachers, and they were probably Hindu meditation teachers, and they taught him that what they knew, and he surpassed what they knew. Each of them, he got further than they were, and they offered for him to take over the ashram, and he said, "No, this doesn't really lead anywhere." So he moved on, and then he became an ascetic. So in those days, like I was saying there, about the thing about self-punishment, hanging onto the bit of driftwood, people would deliberately torture their bodies. So the idea of the guys, the bed of nails is this sort of thing, sitting on a bed of nails, as a way of seeing the body, seeing material things as kind of like evil in inverted commas, and that so somehow that if you can really get beyond that you will come into contact with moksha or liberation. That was the view. That if you purified yourself through asceticism, this is you got somewhere. But anyway, the Buddha to be Siddhartha, he practiced this these, and he became the top guy. He was the top banana, as they say in Manchester. He was the greatest of the ascetics, and he lived on basically. Eventually, he was just living on a grain of rice a day or sesame seed a day or something. And again, that's a bit archetypal, but it didn't work in the end. He did that for 6 years, and he had 5 companions that were all doing the same thing. So they would meditate in the midday sun with surrounded by fires, just as one practice. Just get very, very hot, or to not eat, not drink. And he ended up almost drowning because he was so weak he fell like face down in the river. And he just realized that at some point, this is not getting me anywhere. Yeah. So then he tried everything. He'd had the life of relative luxury, which is like the ocean-going yacht, and he'd had the life of asceticism, which is like hanging onto the bit of driftwood. Yeah. So, but he didn't. He thought, well, where do we go from here? He was kind of on his own. Nobody. That was all that was on offer. Kind of Vedic religion, Brahminical meditation, or asceticism were the two options. Or he'd had the kind of more hedonistic kind of lifestyle. Anyway, it's said that he had this memory from his childhood. This is called the rose apple tree experience. So he had this memory that he was sitting there watching his father, who was the chieftain, do this ploughing. It was like some sort of maybe it's some kind of festival or something, like a ritual thing where the chieftain was ploughing the field. And he says that I recall once when my father, the Shakyan, was working, and I was sitting in the cool shade of a rose apple tree, then, quite secluded from sense desires, secluded from unskillful mental states, I entered and abided in the first dhyana, which is accompanied by initial thought and sustained thought, filled with the rapture and happiness born of seclusion. Then, acting in accordance with mindfulness, he says, I came to the realization, this is the path to awakening. So we talked about the dhyanas, higher states of consciousness, in the series on the Buddha's teaching on mindfulness. So that these are like just natural states that happen when we're paying attention to conditionality, to the conditions that we're in. What Siddhartha said was that he says, why am I afraid? This was his insight around pleasure and pain. Why am I afraid of a happiness that has nothing to do with sensual pleasures and unskillful mental states? Then the thought came to me, I'm not afraid of this happiness, for this happiness has nothing to do with sensual pleasures and unskillful mental states. So, and then he took nourishment, and his fellow ascetics were disgusted with him that he started eating and luxuriating in food and things like that. So basically, what's happening here is he's discovering something. He's discovering something for the first time. So what scholars often say is that, oh yeah, Buddhism somehow followed on from the Vedic religion, and I think in this they're being a bit vague, really. it did follow on historically from the Vedic religion. But what's happening here is a complete break with this way of seeing things. This immortal, having an immortal soul. Because what Gautama realized, the self punishment. So what he realized was that some types of pleasure didn't have a downside. So when we're dealing with the ocean going yacht, it's like that can have a downside because we're taking up the world's resources. But some pleasures, like the pleasure that comes from meditation, when we're not relying on the world of the senses for our pleasure, so we're in seclusion from sensuality. It just means from relying on the world, to give us things. And I talked about worldly feeling as being this arena. So worldly feeling is when we're, it's feeling that arises because of unskillful mental states, like craving and desire and those sorts of things, wrong sorts of desire anyway. And then so you have pleasure that isn't that isn't dependent on the world outside of yourself, and it just arises. So, for instance, spiritual feeling, spiritual pleasure can be something like, we care for somebody and we see them doing well, so we feel happy. That's an example of a pleasure that's in the area of natural morality. It's natural that if we care for somebody and they're doing well, we feel happy for them. So there's no downside to that kind of pleasure. So this is what Gautama is saying about when he says, "Why am I afraid of a happiness? Why am I afraid of that sort of pleasure?" Well, there's no reason to be afraid of it. There's no downside to it. Yeah. So. So what happened next was that as I said, he took nourishment and he sat under the Bodhi tree, and and it says that he made a vow, and I think we can just see this as just illustrative of a kind of like a kind of a confidence or something that he'd found the right, the way, the proper way forward, which in a way was Buddhist ethic. What became Buddhist ethics? Loving kindness, generosity, contentment, truthfulness, and awareness in terms of the 5 precepts. So anything that didn't have greed, hatred, and delusion in it was the way forward. So it's like we can see this as him really having confidence that this is the way forward. And he says, even if my skin should parch, even if my hand should wither, even if my bones should crumble into dust, until I've attained supreme knowledge, I shall not move from this seat. So he sits down under the tree, and he doesn't, he says, I'm not going to move until I've gained enlightenment. But as I said, we can see this as just indicating that he had such he knew that this was the way. He knew his way. He knew the way forward now. So in a way, he's kind of guaranteed to get there. So, and what happens is he goes through the different dhyanas, the levels of meditation, and then reflects on the impermanent nature of his body, and he basically attains enlightenment from there. So I did say at the beginning about looking into Sagramati's book, and so there's a couple of things I want to explore. here with this. Um, so coming back to the metaphysics side of things, so metaphysics is about what's, in a way, what's behind physics, what's behind the material world, and what we can say about it. So in metaphysics, you have the idea of existence and non-existence. You know, whether something exists, whether it doesn't exist. So the Buddha says to somebody called Kaccayana, when he's asked about what right view or samadhi is, and he says the majority of the world, Kaccayana, rely on two views: existence and non-existence. Now he who with right insight, samapana, which means that's pranya, wisdom, sees the arising of the world as it really is, does not hold the view that the world is non-existent, but he who with right insight sees the passing away of the world as it really is, does not hold the view that the world is existent. So he's saying that to think that the world exists is a wrong view. To think that it doesn't exist is a wrong view. Everything exists, that is one extreme. Nothing exists, this is the other extreme. Not going to either extreme, the Tathagata teaches the truth of the middle way, which is dependent co-arising. So this sense of what he's talking about is absolute existence or absolute non-existence. So we can think of ourselves as kind of exist. Well, we do kind of exist. You know, we do experience ourselves as existing, but that existence is a changing, is a constantly changing existence. You know, it's dependently arisen or conditionally co-produced. It's like it is conditioned. So everything about us is conditioned. So we went into this in the series on the Buddha's teaching on mindfulness. So there are these two wrong views of eternalism or sasatavada, and annihilationism or uchedavada. So when Nietzsche, the philosopher Nietzsche, came across Buddhism, he thought that so. Don't know, maybe we should go into this another day. It's maybe a bit complicated. Maybe, what can I say in a couple of minutes? Yeah. So for Nietzsche said God is dead, and basically what he in a way he was responding to Darwin and the idea that, you know, everything's evolution. You know, you can explain everything through science. So when science kind of like started to become dominant in the sense of the Enlightenment, you know, rationality became important. And in a way, the myths and things that were there in religions couldn't be, you know, it was harder for people to kind of take those seriously. But what Nietzsche was worried about was that when you got rid of religion, if people got rid of religion, what was there was a vacuum. It was like a moral vacuum, and he was really worried about nihilism, which is like where you think, oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what we do. You know, there is no moral structure to things. So yeah. So he said God is dead, and but yeah. but he you know he was really worried about he was worried uh, about the consequences of that. And in a way, we have seen that. So in the 20th century, you had two world wars that were hugely destructive, and in a way, technology kind of like was part of that. The fact that in the First World War, it was like people would get out of the trenches and charge into machine gun fire. Almost like they're kind of not quite getting it that it's a different world. So that heroism that you would get with the charge of the Light Brigade was kind of irrelevant to when you've got somebody with a machine gun who you don't even get anywhere near before you get killed. So there's a kind of there's a real with technology, and it's I don't think it's neutral really. So you need this moral compass, this moral morality as well. Um, but Nietzsche thought that Buddhism was he was kind of reading it wrongly really, and he thought it was just quietist. It was like it was for people who'd grown a bit weary of grown a bit weary of life, and so they were just going to come to some accommodation um, uh, with things. So don't get too stressed about things. Don't do things that are going to excite you. Focus on calm, and I suppose you do see this in some Buddhism that there's a lot of focus on kind of like being nice and being pleasant and all that sort of thing. Um, and he thought that like Buddhism was almost like you know similar, like for cows or something. Like just become content. And so this is something called passive nihilism. Where you just you're just coping. So basically, nihilism arises when you there's this gulf between you and the. I mean, it happened in Hinduism because you had this idea of Atman as separate from, and Brahman as separate from phenomenal world. But then, how do you then access that? So it's almost like it led to a depression that, oh yeah, you have this purity over there somewhere, but how do we access it? So but Nietzsche talks about another thing, which is like active nihilism, which was almost like a creative solution to that, where you actually bring positive things into the world. So he didn't understand it, but actually Buddhism is an active nihilism. It is an active response to um, to the problem of uh, God is dead, or the uh, collapse of the potential collapse of morality. So because it's constructing things from it's not relying on something that's permanent, fixed, and beyond us. It's relying on natural morality, where we work with the conditions that we're in to create happiness ourselves. So we work with the raft. With the we bring about pleasure for ourselves and for others by awareness, through practicing awareness. So this is the middle way, and so I'll just finish with this. So in Mahayana Buddhism, which is called the Great Way. So Mahayana, I said before, Tibetan Buddhism is built on Mahayana Buddhism, and there was a Buddhist philosopher called Nagarjuna, uh, who in a way, I think what might have happened was that the Buddha's original teaching may have become a bit forgotten about. You know, the teaching of conditionality, um, and so and also impermanence. So Nagarjuna basically came up with he started talking about sunyata or emptiness. But sunyata, emptiness, is just impermanence. Sagramati always says when he hears sunyata, just read impermanence there. So the so in Mahayana philosophy, so whatever is dependently co-arisen, that is explained to be emptiness. That, being a dependent designation, is itself the middle way. So in a way, he's saying that, you know, what's conditioned. This is emptiness, and this is the middle way. Something that is not dependently arisen, such a thing does not exist. So it's saying everything is dependently arisen. Therefore, the non-empty thing does not exist. So yeah, so we've got this correlation between the middle way, conditionality, emptiness, and impermanence. They're all kind of part of the same system that we're working with, and yeah. So today I've talked about the middle way, and I've illustrated it through this. I think this diagram thing that came up with when I was doing study on the survey of Buddhism. I just found it helpful to actually give things these images. So, you know, the image of the man, you know, a person holding onto a bit of driftwood, as really not really looking after yourself, and maybe sort of thinking that matter is evil, the body is evil. It's you know, should be kind of like we should try and do without it. That's one extreme. The other extreme is where we put too much focus on the body and luxury, and in a way we kind of don't worry too much about the effects of our actions on others and things like that. And then in the middle you've got the raft, you've got the rowing, the inflatable dinghy, and so you are looking after yourself. You're not in the water, but you're not overdoing it, and you're looking at, well, what you know, how does happiness come about for myself and for others? So you practice in natural morality, seeing how things work in experience, and you practicing contentment. You're looking internally for your meditation practice as a source of happiness rather than outside of yourself. And then through that, you kind of like passing down the middle of the road between eternalism on the one hand and annihilationism on the other. Okay, so that's it for today, and I'll have to piece the three pieces of these videos together at the end. So that's it. Thanks everyone. See you tomorrow. Bye.